o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. That's okay. So I'm really excited that you guys are here tonight because I really just want to give everybody the information. I think it's really important that you get the facts and the actual details of this millage proposal and then make the decision that's best for your family yourself instead of listening to maybe somebody that doesn't have all the information together. So I'm really excited that you're here tonight. I'm going to kind of go through some introductions to begin with, and then I got about 11-minute presentation, kind of more formal. This is being broadcast on cable, so I'm a little more formal than that. I normally like to walk around and kind of talk to people. So since it is on cable, kind of going to stay in this area here. And after that, this will be the 6th meeting that I've done on the millage proposal. So I've been collecting questions throughout this whole process. So at the end, I've got all the questions that I've been asked so far and some questions that I've seen on Facebook. And I will present those at the end. And then after that, any questions that you have, just feel free to ask. So I'm Melissa Marsh. I'm the city manager of Madison Heights, for those of you who don't know me. And we have our deputy city manager, Corey Haynes, with us. He's also the police chief. Greg Lolito, the fire chief, is here, and Amy Mishak, the human resources director. So and Barry Hicks. He surprised me to show up tonight. He's the new community and economic development coordinator. We just hired him this past April. And Rosalind Yerman, the librarian. So most of us will be around after the meeting tonight. If you have any questions, just feel free to come up and ask. And I also have access to the tax database. So after I get through the proposal, if you want to know exactly what this is going to mean to you, feel free to come up and I can look up your actual taxable value and tell you exactly what this is going to mean to you. Because we talk a lot about averages throughout this presentation because that's really the only way that you can tell it. Some people are less. Some people are more, so I can look it up for each individual person. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about Proposal MH. It's a ballot proposal that council approved to put on the ballot November the 5th. So it will be up to the voters then to decide if they want to approve it or not. So I've only been the city manager since last July, not a couple of weeks ago. But I've been with the city for about 14 years. And my main job at the city has been financial management. And during that time, I'm really proud to say that we've had a really high bond rating, even through the recession. We also have been recognized by Standard & Poor's for our very stable and good financial practices. So one of the things that happened when I took over as city manager is I really wanted to change the way the city set their goals. So in the past, we had kind of set goals, each department kind of doing their own thing, what they were going to do that upcoming year. And I really changed that to a strategic planning process. And council and staff worked really hard. We had 4 public meetings that any of you could have attended, and staff worked behind the scenes countless hours to develop a strategic plan of what we wanted to see the city look like 10 years from now, just a vision of what we thought that the city should be. And then we worked backward to this past fall to determine what steps do we need to start taking to reach that goal. So the goal actually ended up being Madison Heights as a vibrant, fiscally sound city that's competitive with our neighboring communities and retaining and attracting residents and businesses by providing high-quality services, including public safety and quality of life programs. And then I kind of go on to talk about what quality of life programs were in the context that we talked about it at the strategic planning. So that was economic development, parks, recreation, library, and special events. Really the things that people want in their community to make them want to stay there, to make them want to get out of their house and do things within the community. So throughout the strategic planning process, City Council came up with 5 overall goals, and then they came up with focus areas within each one of those goals. So the 5 main areas that City Council wanted to focus on was public safety. It was unanimous. We all agreed nobody wants to live in a city where you don't feel safe. So that's the #1 focus of City Council moving forward. Economic development, because we need to have a very diverse tax base. Quality of life programs. Infrastructure and capital assets, and that would be things such as buildings, equipment, I think that's pretty much it, but trucks, cars, those kind of things, as well as City Hall and police and fire station, and fiscal stability. And this, I know this is really small for you to see. This is available on the website. The entire plan is available on the website. I also posted it several times on my Facebook page. So if you're interested in any of it, just you can email me or you can look it up on the website as well. It is a little small, and it also has action steps, things that we're going to start doing to get to each one of these things, because you can't achieve all of this in 1 year. So under fiscal stability, council and staff that agreed that in order to achieve this vision, to have Madison Heights where we wanted it to be in 10 years, we needed to start investing in the city. And to do that, we needed to have funding. So this promoted the goal under financial stability to provide a reliable financial plan that ensures stability in accordance with the strategic plan and promotes a proactive rather than reactive response to issues. So right now we're very reactive. We don't have the money to invest in our infrastructure and our equipment, and you'll kind of hear the police chief and fire chief talk about this in a little bit. We basically wait until things are broken, and then we scurry around and try to fix them because we don't have the money to be proactive. We don't have the money to replace the fire engines and the police vehicles and fix the roof of the police station like we're supposed to. So we're trying to get out of that mode. We're constantly in the I'm broke mode, and so we're trying to get out of that so we can move the city forward. So we looked at many different ideas throughout the strategic planning process. We didn't just say, let's increase taxes, it's going to solve all of our problems. We brainstormed tons of ideas, and we still are pursuing several different ideas. We recently just started looking at leasing for our vehicles. That's not the most solid financial plan, but that's something new that we're trying to look at and consider. We have started financing different purchases, which is something that this city in the past has really taken pride in, that we had a very low debt. And the reason we took pride in that is because during the recession, that really saved us. If you have debt, you have to pay that before you can pay anything else. So because this city had really low debt, we were able to survive this recession, and we didn't survive it unscathed, as you know, but we survived it better than a lot of communities around, and one of the reasons were we were not taking on debt. So we have started doing that. We just financed a fire engine, and we are currently about to borrow money from the Water and Sewer Department in order to fix our police roof. And that's because we don't have the money to pay for those repairs. But an example of the police roof is it's causing damage throughout the entire building, so we have to stop the problem. It has become quite significant. So what's stopping us from achieving this vision today? After all, the economy's great, the housing market's doing fantastic, everybody's house is worth quite a bit more than it used to be. Well, things aren't any better for the city. Things are not significantly better for the city, I should say. So 61.5% of the city's revenues come from property taxes, and that's taxes paid for by businesses and homeowners alike. So during the recession, the city of Madison Heights lost over 35% of our taxable value. So I need to back up and explain two things. The state of Michigan has two laws, and if you've listened to my budget presentations, you've heard this time and time again. It's called the Headley Amendment and Proposal A. Those two laws keep the city from recovering during times of recession. So if your house was worth $100,000 in 2008 and the recession hit and your house plummeted, the taxable value plummeted right along with it. There's nothing at the state that protects the city on the down. We just hit the bottom. And we have a very proactive financial forecasting system here. It was in place. I can't take credit for that. It was in place before I got here, but it really alerted the city. We do a forecast lookout, and we were able to see this coming. So we started making cuts. Even though we did that, it didn't stop our taxable revenue from dropping. Well, now the recession's over and your house starts to go up. The city can only collect money at the stated rate of inflation, or 5%, whichever is less. And I say the state-rated calculated inflation because that's different than the inflation rate that you might hear about on NPR. The state calculated rate of inflation comes out every October, maybe the first part of November, and it is really set by the tax commission at the state. And so last year it was 2.4%, and that's the highest amount that I have seen almost the whole time I've been working here. This upcoming year, it's projected to be about 1.7. So what that means is that the city can't increase more than that unless we have a lot of additions. In a city like Madison Heights that's built out, you can't have a lot of additions. So I shouldn't say you can't. It's very hard to have a lot of additions. So our tax millage gets rolled back to keep things from growing higher than the rate of inflation. So this chart I want to make reference to kind of explains the picture. This is the taxable value in Madison Heights, and as you can see, in 2006, 7, and 8, we were around about, this is actually $1.2 billion, but when that gets calculated into taxable value or the tax amount, that ends up being $1.2 million. So for every $1 million we levied back in 2008, we collected $1.2 million. As you can see, this started to drop, and by like 2013, we were only collecting about $750,000 per $1 million. Now, in 2009, we are at $800,000 $1 million. So this has no mechanism of going back up without a millage increase or a lot of additions. And I'm going to talk about new buildings and things later in the presentation, but there really is no mechanism for that to go up at this point. So right now we're at $822,000. So at this rate, we are not going to get back to that 2006 level until 2038. And that's assuming that there's not another recession. And we all know that that is impossible. It is not, we can't go until the year 2038 and not have a blip in the economy. It's not going to happen. So I know a lot of you are probably like myself, and I really, even though I work with numbers all the time, it's really hard for me to imagine what $1.2 million is, because I'm never going to have $1.2 million. So I tried to put this just in a context that somebody could understand, and I ran this by my husband, like, could you understand this? And he said yes, so I'm like, I'm going with it. So if you made, this would be the same as if you made $60,000 a year in 2008, and you took a pay cut to $39,000 a year with no mechanism to get back up. It's the same percentage decrease. So this slide has details for millages that the city levies through the general fund. There's several things that I want to point out on this slide because it's very important to our overall conversation. First of all, the city levies 8 separate general fund millages, and these are detailed at the bottom, and I apologize, they're kind of hard to see, but it's general operating, vehicle millage, advanced life support, solid waste, senior citizens, police and fire pension, library, and millage restoration. So the first, this green bar at the bottom, is the city charter millage. A charter millage is the millage that the city basically was founded on, and that was originally 10 mills. It now has been rolled back to 8.8. So there's no mechanism for the green bar to go up. The next lines that is very hard to see because it's so small would be vehicles and ALS, right where you see the red line. And then at the very top is library and millage restoration. Well, Proposal L, which is the library, and the yellow bar, millage restoration, those two millages are expiring next year. So those are completely going to go away. And if you remember, back in 2011, the city came out and the voters approved these two millages to keep the library functioning even at reduced hours. And even with this Proposal L, we're not able to really move the library forward. If you have visited over there, you see many of the challenges that we have in that building. And the millage restoration was to fund general services such as elections, accounting, just really anything that comes from the general day-to-day, not the police and fire and that type of thing, but things like street sweeping, parks, maintenance, snow removal. Those are just to name a few. So what have we done as a city? As I said, we had a very aggressive financial forecasting system. In 2008, we saw that we were going to be losing revenues, and we didn't waste any time making cuts. So in the next, from 2008 till 2014, I'm not really sure how many years that is, we took over 200 reductions at the city, and I've got 12 pages of reductions on my desk that I can show you. But some of the most significant ones were we eliminated 47 full-time positions throughout the entire city. That was in addition to 31 full-time positions that had already been eliminated in the city since 1997. We had labor negotiations. The employees took furlough days, wage reductions, elimination and reduction of pension benefits, retiree health care. All the insurance benefits have changed. leave time has changed. We contracted out entire departments of the city, and they remain contracted out. The assessing department, information technology department, the housing department, the operation of the nature center is now at Oakland County, the reduction or contracting of citywide mowing, all building inspections, sidewalk replacements and inspections, and I'm sure there are some others that I have missed. Out of the 200 reductions, we have only restored about 12 of the items, and the largest ticket item that we have restored was the Special Investigations Unit at the police department. If you read about that in the newspaper or you saw it, that was really the only big thing that we have restored. Everything else has stayed completely eliminated from the budget. So we also have deferred infrastructure or equipment maintenance, which I kind of went through a little bit ago, that we no longer are proactive with our infrastructure or equipment. We're very reactive to that. I've got like 2 more pages of cuts, but I'm not going to read them all to you. What's going on? I apologize. You would know I would have technical difficulties. Oh, it's completely dead now. I'm not sure what's going on. I'll just keep talking without my slides. I don't have a clue what happened to it. It's completely frozen. My next slide, if you could see it, shows the decrease of employees. We went from 227 employees to 149 employees, which is where we are today. And this has affected all the departments throughout the entire city. But I'll talk about the department that I know the best. No idea. So I was in finance for numerous years. Maybe I'll give this to somebody else to try to fix. I don't know what happened to it. I apologize. Of course it would happen today. It hasn't happened any of the other 6 presentations. So when I first started working here 14 years ago in finance, we had 12 employees, not counting myself. That department now has 5. And that is an example of how we run the entire city. So this decrease has really affected some of the bigger departments like police, fire, and the DPS. So the police personnel have dropped by 14 positions from 76 to 62. The fire personnel have dropped 10 from 40 to 30. And public service is down 12 positions from 34 to 22 people. We still, except for the things that we have contracted out, such as mowing, we still try to provide high quality services to the residents. So I think that the city has done a very good job in not letting the residents really see all the cuts that we have taken. And the employees do try to constantly do more. We never plan on getting back to these pre-recession levels. Oh, is it fixed? Oh, thank you very much. It's not our goal to get back to these pre-recession levels. We're just trying to get back to the part that we can deliver services. We do still constantly look for grants. I got a little confused with my computer. So I did want to talk here about staffing. Staffing is something that you need reoccurring money to fund reoccurring expenses such as staff. So it's very hard to fund, we do it, but it's very hard to fund a position with grant money, even though we have grant money for 2 firefighters at this time, because when the grant ends, you don't have a mechanism to keep paying for those employees. Bear with me, maybe I'll get it up and going again. You know, the silence is killing me. Oh, yay. keep it up here and do it old school way. Here's my fancy slide on employees now. You can see this is illustrative of the decreases that we have taken. So in 1997, we were at 227 employees, and this is citywide, and now we're at 149. So why are we talking about... I just want to give up. Why are we talking so much about staffing? First of all, that's a big part of what this proposal is for public safety staffing. And public safety staffing is an issue because our calls for service have increased drastically. So one of the things they've done in this country is teach us all how to call 911 really well. And that's a good thing. I think people's lives are saved for that for sure. But since 2009, our call volume has increased 41.9%. And you can see from this slide, if I had it showing to you correct, in 2019, we're estimated to have about 4,800 runs. So you can see how much this has increased since 1994. The red line of this slide shows our staffing levels. So during the same period, our staffing levels have decreased 16%. The little yeah, this is just the fire department. So the little up from 2018 to 19 was an increase of 2 positions, and we are funding that with a SAFER grant that we are getting. So this is just the fire department, but all of these calls go through the emergency dispatching service. So I could show a similar chart for the police department. So why millage and what exactly is being proposed? And this is one of the things, there's a lot of confusion because the state dictates how you write a proposal. So our charter is 10 mills, but as you heard me say a little bit ago, that has already been rolled back to 8.8. That cannot go back up to 10. When I ask the voters to go from 10 mills to 16, it doesn't go to 16. First of all, because the 10 is already reduced to 8. So that's 8 plus 6, not 10 plus 6. And in addition to that, we are rolling in 4 other millages. And the reason we're rolling in the 4 other millages is, like I explained a few minutes ago, the library millage is about to expire, and millage restoration is about to expire. And when I brought the idea back to council, nobody in the room thought that it was a good idea to be out this year talking about public safety, which everybody in the room agreed that we needed, and turn right around next year and start crying again because now we need money for the library. Now we need money for millage restoration. So we really were trying to look at a comprehensive idea of how can we fix this problem one time and have it fixed, be done with it. So that is how the charter millage came about. So it is not a 6 mil increase. It is a net increase of 3.3684 mils. And that's offset, actually that should be a 7. It's 3.3687 mils. As you can see at the bottom, and it's offset with 2.6316. So that's the amount of the current increase. So the amount levied for this purpose is detailed. So part of the increase would be to roll back up. So as I was explaining earlier, there's a rollback. Roll back up that library millage to the original 1 mil that the voters approved, and roll back up the millage restoration to the 1.18 that the voters originally approved. We also would be increasing vehicles and equipment, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. That's currently set at 1/4 mil. And we would be eliminating the advanced life support millage, which currently is levied to all the residents, and instead replacing that with 2.25 mils. So 2.25 plus the 2.5 for 2.5. And that will allow us to increase staffing. So as I said earlier, feel free to stick around after. I can tell you exactly what this is going to mean to you. Just for the average taxable value in the city. So some people are less than this, some people are more than this. This is just the average in the city. It costs 36 cents a day to approve the millage. So in 2020, the average market value of Madison Heights is $115,000 with a taxable value of $38,000. So in 2010, we were talking about the taxable value in the recession. In 2010, the average market value was $121,000, and the average taxable value was $56,000. So the average tax bill in Madison Heights at that time was $1,025. In 2020, without the proposal, the average market value would be $115,820, and the city tax amount would be $961. With this proposal, the tax bill would be $1,090. So that compares to what it was before the recession. So what is this millage going to do? We kind of already talked about this, but this will stabilize the funding for general operations and library services. So as I've already said, 2 special millages will be expiring in 2020. That's the library millage and the millage restoration. And 2 other millages will be rolled in for advanced life support and vehicles. We will be improving emergency services. We're going to hire additional staff to reduce wait times and improve services. Specifically, we're going to hire 3 firefighters, we're going to hire 2 police officers, and we're going to hire 1 dispatch person. We also will be able to address critical capital asset needs and infrastructure, especially in the police and fire departments. This will give us the opportunity to increase quality of life improvements that are requested by the residents, and I'm going to kind of go through that about the public outreach that we're going to be doing. And I say that they can include because we're wanting to hold this to see what the residents actually want, what they say. So some examples are updated play structures throughout the city park system. I don't have to tell most of you that the only way we replace play structures now is when we get grants. You have to look no further than Wildwood Park to see a place where we removed a play structure and it pretty much sat vacant for a year while we wait on that grant to have that installed. A splash pad, and that's just there because I hear that when I'm out in the community, but if the community ends up not wanting it, that's fine too. Walking trails are always a hot topic. Trees, especially vents, and then I'm going to touch on this a little bit later under the questions, but downtown development and or enhancements. So that's something we're going out to do a master citywide plan. If the city wants that to be downtown, the millage isn't going to build a downtown. We don't have a traditional downtown in Madison Heights. It's going to help make it more walkable and put in enhancements that the residents could use down there. But we're not building businesses or doing anything like that. And this amount that we're even talking about under quality of life is 0.57 of a mil. So that comes out, so 1 mil equals about $822,000. So you're talking about $500,000 that could be used. It could not be levied, or it could be levied. It would be levied as needed for any of these types of programs. And the tax levy is set during the budget, and there are public hearings for that as well. All of you are welcome to attend that. No one ever does, but I'm always hoping somebody's going to show up to listen to my budget speech one day. So this slide looks a little familiar, I hope. This is not the same slide you saw a little bit ago. This is a different slide showing what if millage MH passed. So you look over under 2021, and you can see now that green bar has a mechanism to actually grow. And at the top, the yellow and brown bars are gone, as well as the purple and red in the middle. So those 4 millages have been rolled in to the charter millage, but the millage bar still is not as high as it was in 2008. So what if the millage proposal is not successful? Public safety will remain as is. However, if the calls for service it continues to increase, we will have to look at other service delivery methods. And we will continue to defer infrastructure, equipment maintenance, pretty much everything status quo until we can't status quo anymore. And if another recession hits, there will be additional cuts because we have no cushion anymore. That's kind of the conclusion of my presentation. I should have changed the picture because that's inappropriate use of our new ADA swing set up there, but so now, like I said, I've given 6 of these presentations. I've got a couple questions that have been consistent at every single meeting that I've gone to. So I'm going to kind of go through those, and then if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask, or you can come up and talk to me after. I do just remind me I need to repeat the question because it's being videotaped, so the public watching at home can't hear what your question is. So first of all, the best way to stay informed with what's going on at the city is the city has a web page just for millage information. It's already up and going. It has a few facts and questions out there. It has a calculator out there, so when you're talking to your neighbors or friends, they want to know what it's going to cost them, they can go out and use the calculator. It's www.madisonheights.org/millage. Also, for those of you who are on Facebook, I have a very active Facebook site. I'm at City Manager MH. I only use it for city things. I occasionally if you're my friends, I'll like or follow what you're doing, but I don't post crazy personal things like that. Not that I have anything crazy, but it's a really good source for city information. It's a good source to know what events are going on, and I try to share different department events all the time. I'm quite active on that. And we also have a city Facebook page. So at City of Madison Heights. I have another meeting like this planned, and like I said, I've already done 6. So if you have any groups, the 6 meetings I've done have been some for employees, but some have been private groups that have invited me out. I've done a beer and budget conversation at Cadillac Brewing, so I'm up for going anywhere, talking to anybody who'll listen to me. So if you have a group getting together and you want me to show up and talk, I'd be more than happy to do that. But the next formal event that we have like this is going to be at what is Madison Place, but I know it as the Union Hall. It's actually on Horace Brown Drive, and it's going to be September the 19th at 6 o'clock. And I really was trying to focus younger families in the city. So I have asked recreation staff to be on hand and come up with some activities for kids. I don't know what those activities are going to be. Might be a movie, but something to kind of keep the kids entertained for an hour so the parents can listen and get their questions answered. So if you know anybody who's interested, tell them to come out. I really just want to get the information out there. I want people to be informed and make the decision that's best for them, like I've already said. So what questions have I been asked? One of the top questions I get asked all the time is, the city gets all of my money anyway, where do my tax dollars go? So I've done 2 different pie charts here. The first one's Lanphier School District, the second one's Madison. But you can see they're kind of similar as to how much the city gets of your total tax bill. We're about 43%. In Lanphier, we're 42.6. In Madison, we're 43.1. So all the other things, some people don't even know what they pay taxes for. They're always shocked that they pay taxes for the zoo and the DIA, even though they had to vote and approve that. But they probably didn't vote. So these are the other things that you pay taxes for. Oakland County Public Transportation, state education tax, intermediate school district, Oakland Community College, the Huron Metro Parks, which I'm a big fan of and hope people are using those and are paying for them, and the Oakland County General Fund and Parks and Recreation. I rolled those into one slide on the chart, sliver of the pie, I should say, to kind of keep the congestion down. So how does Madison Heights millages compare? And I've broken this down into 4 separate things, and this is a topic that I also get asked quite a bit. I got asked this by council. I get asked by this on Facebook all the time, and I've seen a lot of information about this on Facebook. So these are the 4 different topics. What is the millage rate in Madison Heights to begin with? What is the municipality overall taxable value? What's included in the tax rate? And what's the average residential taxable value? All these things are important parts of this conversation. So what is our millage rate? This is our millage rate compared to other cities around in the area. This is not every community in Oakland County. I thought the slide would just have too many bars on it for you to see. These are some of the surrounding communities that are right around Madison Heights and that I know that people compare us to. So Madison Heights does have a high taxable value, I will say, 25.2887. We're not the highest, we're definitely not the lowest. But one of the factors that you need to take into account is Madison Heights, and you'll see this on the next slide, has a very low taxable value. So this is the taxable value comparison. And you can see this slide is almost flipped from the slide right before it. The cities with the highest millage have the lowest taxable value, and the cities with the highest taxable value have the lowest millage. And that goes hand in hand because 1 mill in the city of Troy generates $5 million. 1 mill in the city of Madison Heights generates $822,000. Well, when you talk about police and fire and just employees in general, you pay them almost the same. It doesn't cost us any less to have a firefighter in Madison Heights. They might make a little bit less here or there, $2,000, $3,000, but at the end of the day, if they can go 2 miles north and make $5,000 or $10,000 more, they're not going to stay here. So we're competitive. We're in the middle kind of wages and everything. We're not at the top. We're not at the bottom. We're kind of in the middle like we are with taxable value. And I will go back and talk about the millage rate. We're kind of in the middle with that as well. So one of the other things I want to point out back to this slide, so you can't just look at this slide and say, oh my goodness, Madison Heights has the highest tax rate around, I'm not going to buy there. You really have to look at I want to call it the cost of living in a community, because there are other things that you get for your millage here that you don't get in other places. So I picked Troy and Rochester Hills. I've been asking employees and just residents in general, well, I shouldn't say residents because they wouldn't live somewhere else, but employees mostly. If you live somewhere else and you get a flyer or you get your water bill or tax bill or something, just bring me a copy. Just want to see it. So I've been doing this for a couple of months and looking at what services are offered, what things are included in a tax bill. So Troy and Rochester Hills, which have the lowest millage rate, also have the highest taxable value. What do you get if you lived in Rochester Hills or Troy compared to Madison Heights? And as I just discussed, the taxable value and then the millage rate and what 1 mill generates. So 1 mill generates $822,000 in Madison Heights. In Troy, it's $5 million. In Rochester Hills, it's $3.6 million. But there are some significant service differences, and there's a lot more service differences than what I've got listed on this slide, but these are the most significant ones. Full service police department. Madison Heights has it, Troy has it, but in Rochester Hills, you go to call 911, they're calling the Oakland County Sheriff, so be prepared to wait. Full service fire department, Madison Heights has it. Troy runs volunteers. They don't have a full service fire department, so it could be your next door neighbor running on your call. Rochester Hills only recently has moved to a combination full-time, part-time department. In the past, and in the past as recently as I think 2 years ago, they ran volunteer fire there as well. EMS transport, and this is a big ticket item in Madison Heights, and this is who you're calling when you have an emergency. Yes, Madison Heights has it. Troy runs private ambulance, and no, they don't. And Rochester Hills runs full-service EMS. Trash and recycling. I get more complaints about GFL than anything else in the city, and rightfully so, I can say. But in Madison Heights, the average resident pays about $95 for that service, and that's included in your millage. If you lived in Rochester Hills, you would pay that in addition to your taxes. It's $223 a year that you pay in addition to your taxes. So that's reflective in the Madison Heights tax rate, taxable value. It's not in the Rochester Hills. So it's things like that you have to account for. There's tons of other ones. The biggest significant one that I hear about from residents that I would think isn't really a big deal, but it is leaf picking up. So in Madison Heights, you rake your leaves right to the street. The DPS comes along, sucks them up, happy day. These other communities, at least Rochester Hills, you bag those things from bags that you've purchased for $9.95 at Sam's Club, and you schlep them out to the road. So it's things like that, the services that you get in Madison Heights that you don't get in other communities. And you can compare the same with Clawson and any other communities. You really have to look at what you're getting. You can't just look at the millage rate and say, oh my goodness, there's a high millage rate there, and I'm going to move somewhere else, because there are added expenses other places that people oftentimes don't take into consideration. So what's the average tax bill? We were talking about the taxable value and the millage rate, and I should have kind of resorted this because Hazel Park is the lowest. But Madison Heights is $961 currently. With proposal MH, it would be $1,087. Hazel Park is at $741. And then you can see, because the average taxable value is higher, how the amount of the average tax bill is higher as well. So the next question that I get is, what is the focus on the downtown or economic development? And I won't go into all the comments I got because they were all over the board. Some people really want a walkable DDA. Some people don't want anything at all to change ever. And so, as I said a little bit ago, 0.57 of a mil is purposed for quality of life items to be determined by the residents. So the city has started a citywide master plan update, and when I say started, it literally has just started. Barry Hicks and myself and Sean from the DPS did interviews for a company to do that for us. A big part of that's public engagement. It's your opportunity to tell the city what you want to see in the city master plan. It focuses on zoning of communities, but it also focuses on different things that you want to see. So we're actually doing 2 plans together to save money. We're doing our Parks and Recreation Master Plan update as well. And that plan is required in order to apply for Parks and Recreation grants through the state. So we have to have that plan updated. So through this process, the community will talk about what they want, what features they want, what things they want in their community. This company will go back and professionally design different things, come up with different ideas, and then give us an implementation plan of what we can do to start getting the community the things that they want. So that is happening simultaneously with this. That's going to be going to City Council the last meeting of August. So they will be approving the consultant to do that. So throughout the winter, there will be a very aggressive public outreach program through the master planning update. So that'll be a mechanism for us to gauge what people really want to see in the downtown, or what do they want to see in economic development? Do they want a walkable community? So this 0.57 of a mill will give us money to actually do something, because what happens without the millage is we go through this activity of doing the master plan. We ask you all what you want. You tell us you want these things, and I say, this is great, and I put the plan on the shelf, and it collects dust, because I don't have any money to do the things that you've now told me that you want, because I don't have any money. So I don't know what the bar is at the top. So what's happening to all the money from businesses? The next question that I get right after they get done complaining about a new business that's coming in at John R., like the city controls that. The first example would be, I'm going to call it Business A, but we all are going to know who it is. So let's assume that Business A finds a strip mall in the city, prime area of the city, in a large vacant area with a store that has been dark for, let's say, since 2014. So the city, or the building, when it sat there dark, it didn't use police services. Nobody was stealing anything. Didn't use water services. Water was shut off. It didn't use any city services at all. But that dark store paid their tax bill every single year without missing a beat. They paid their taxes. They didn't use any city services. It's a city manager's dream. The only thing that was wrong with it was it's an eyesore. Nobody likes to see it. It's not good for the community. It doesn't attract anything new there. So we have this developer come in. The developer's great. They're rebuilding the whole strip mall. And the taxable value went on that property was $4.3 million. It's now going up to $7 million. Oh, the residents act like I'm now rich. Well, that's not how it works. First of all, there are incentives that these people can apply for through the state. But even without that, the estimated city tax maximum amount would be $68,000. That's on the high end. Now, I don't want to sound like a snob, but I can't hire a firefighter with $68,000. It helps. It does help. But it doesn't solve the problems. One development does not solve the problems of the city. And Madison Heights does not have a lot of vacant property to add and build new subdivisions and create all these additions. So this would be the kind of addition that I was talking about earlier that increases taxable value, but we don't have a mechanism for having a lot of that in the city. So the second example, if I know all of you are at home watching the city council meetings, at the last council meeting, City Council approved a luxury senior housing development. And everybody agreed that's a housing stock that Madison Heights needs. We don't have a luxury type place for our seniors who might not want to live in their homes anymore to move to while they're still active. So we all agreed that that was needed. State law provides for a pilot, and a pilot is a payment in lieu of taxes. So they basically are tax exempt, and they have to make a payment to the city. So the current taxable value, they bought 3 properties, or they are buying or something on DeQuinder. The current taxable value is $163,000. This new housing development, the taxable value is estimated to be $5.6 million. As you can see there, that addition is huge, but they have a pilot through the state, which means they don't pay taxes. So the pilot agreement will allow them to pay 4% of their rents. And then I have to take that money and disperse it to all the taxing units. So the city works as a collector for all those people that you saw on the pie chart earlier, Oakland County, the schools, the zoo. I collect taxes for all those places, so a lot of people think that we're keeping it all. But we write checks and pay all those people the taxes right back out the door. So we would have to split that. So the city from this development is getting $20,300. Now, when I saw that, I thought, well, these people aren't using the schools. They're probably not going to be going to Huron Metro Parks all the time. But what are they going to be doing? Probably calling EMS. So I worked with them to come up with an emergency services agreement. So in addition to the $20,000, they are also going to have an emergency services agreement of an additional $25,000 that will go up by CPI or inflation every year. But what does that mean to the city? We're getting $45,000 for a development that now is going to be taking up over 3 acres on DeQuinder. So those are two examples, and those are really the only two examples that I have of growth in the city. Because small businesses that come to the city that are just renting space or starting out new can file for personal property tax exemption. So they don't have to pay taxes on their equipment anymore. They don't have to pay taxes for the stuff that they do. And if they don't own the building, they don't have to pay taxes anymore, because under Governor Rick Snyder, he had personal property tax exemption, which I talked about for years in my budget presentation. So other questions that I have, and I'll call on the police and fire chief to assist answering these, because they know their departments way better than me, is what is the funding for vehicles now? So as I said, we currently have $0.25 It has been rolled back to 0.24, 0.2483, I think. It generates about $201,000, and I know that seems like a lot of money, but we had to save that for 3 years to buy one fire engine, because a fire engine is $598,000. That's before the tariffs came down about 6 months ago. So now those vehicles are about $610,000. So we have to save that millage 3 years to buy one vehicle. So that meant those 3 years, we didn't have money to buy any other vehicles. We try very hard to buy 5 police vehicles a year. We do that because we have drug forfeiture funds. The only way you have drug forfeiture funds is if you're making drug busts in the city. So hopefully, you know, it would be great if that was going down. So through this millage, that would be going up to 0.75. So this money is also used, the next piece of critical equipment, and it kind of gets not talked about when you're talking about public safety, but one of the things that most people use is the Department of Public Services. And I would say that they too, even though they're not traditionally listed as public safety, they are a public safety department, because let a windstorm come through your street or have a snow emergency, who do you want coming down the street? You want the snowplows, because you're going to want to get out. So those dump trucks we just bought, again at the city council meeting, we bought a tandem dump truck for $228,000. So that's $0.25 what we currently get under V. So the second question is, what are we gaining by consolidating millages? As I explained, first of all, we're going to hire 6 people with the millage. It's extremely hard to go out and ask for public safety millage that's going to expire in 10 years when I'm hiring an employee that hopefully is going to work 20. So there is a problem with how am I going to fund this person when the millage expires, other than I got to come back out and ask to vote again, which there is a cost to. We have 2 other millages that are expiring next year, and I don't want to, council didn't want to come out to the residents year after year, please approve a millage, please approve a millage. I mean, after a while it gets not very productive, I don't think. So this would allow some stable funding. It will consolidate the millages into the general fund. It will make them indefinite, so they don't expire. The library millage is not going to expire. It's actually going to be part of the charter millage. 1 mil of that will be dedicated to the library, but it will not be expiring in the L form that it is today. So the next 2 questions, at least, I'm going to turn over to the police and fire. The third one, or the next question is, how much will the service changes or response times be reduced by increasing these personnel? So I'll turn it over to the fire chief to talk about how it's going to affect fire and EMS, because it's a significant issue. And I want him to kind of talk about what's happening now, because I think the residents don't really realize, if you don't call 911, you wouldn't realize what's happening in our current situation.
Thank you, Melissa. Oh, it's loud. Really loud. I'm going to step back. Well, thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. We really appreciate you getting informed about this millage. But first and foremost, our goal of this millage is to add 3 firefighters, like the city manager said. This will take us to a 10 firefighter per day staffing. Our goal is to always have 4 vehicles staffed at all times. As you saw the chart, as the more frequency the runs go up, the more frequency we're out of the building. So there are times when, right now, where if you were to call, where we might not have a unit available, which we wanted to eliminate as best we can. So these firefighters will go to the daily staffing. Right now, we have 9 firefighters are assigned to a shift, but when we fall below 8 at Fire Station 2, that turns into a jump station. So what that means is there's 2 vehicles down there, a fire engine and an ambulance. So when we fall below 8, that crew has to jump between either the fire truck or the ambulance. So when a call is received in the Station 2's response area or anywhere in the city, if it's an EMS call, that crew will then jump on the ambulance, go help the resident in need, and that fire engine will remain unstaffed. So if another call comes in, that engine is not able to respond, and then our Fire Station 1 would come if they're available. The problem is, as the runs go up, we're out of the building more frequently, and we're relying on mutual aid more and more. Since 2011, our need for mutual aid has gone up 175%. 10 years ago, we never talked about needing other communities to help us, especially for EMS, but now we're relying more and more. And as we're relying more and more, other communities are relying more and more, so they're not available. So our goal is to always, to try to have the 4 vehicles staffed on a 24-hour basis. So that is what the goal of the millage is, to increase the staffing on an average every day. Is it?
I think so.
I will add one thing too, and the city manager, we have a ladder truck that's coming up on 25 years old, and that's estimated cost is $1.3 million for replacement. So
we did submit a grant.
We did submit a grant for it. We're hoping we get the grant, if that's wonderful, but that just shows you how expensive it is to maintain these vehicles and to replace them. So that's just something I wanted to add.
So we are still looking for grants, even if the millage passes. We're not going to stop looking for grants. I think we're getting more aggressive looking for grants in the past year. And so if this piece of equipment gets approved through a grant, we would use that money instead of using the part of the levy. So we have the discretion to levy it if we need it, or if we don't get the grant, we can. The other part, and I'm not sure that you mentioned it, was the number of times last year that we didn't have anyone available to send.
Well,
so
for
it
the
was
first,
around 40.
I'm sorry, for the first 6 months of this year, there was 40 calls where a resident called 911. I'm not specific on the emergency, but there was 40 times where we were assisting other residents on our calls. Station 1 was out, Station 2 was out, and that's when either the engine or the rescue at Station 2 was on staff. So there was 40 times so far this year where our dispatchers was unable to get someone to respond from the city, so we had to rely on another neighboring community, which ultimately affects response time because they're coming from further away.
So we don't tell you that as a scare tactic, but we just want to make you aware so you can make the decisions. And if you have more questions for the fire chief, he'll be around after as well. So do you have, turn it over to the deputy city manager and police chief to talk about how, yes.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
What actually is a grant? How does that work?
Well, the grant is through the federal government, and so there's tons of grant opportunities, not only through the federal government, but from the state, from private companies, from nonprofits. And so through the federal government, though, during the recession it really started, they came out with this called a SAFER grant. And they originally started by helping communities that could no longer staff their fire department. So you had to prove that you were of financial need and that your staffing was less. So we did get one staffing grant in 2010, I think, to hire 2 employees. And if you remember back at that time, we had laid off employees at the fire department. So we were able to call those employees back and pay for them through the federal grant money. We did that because we knew that within 2 years we were going to have 2 retirements. So when 2 people retired, we didn't replace them, and then we rolled the grant people into the unfilled positions. So we didn't increase our staffing after the fact, and we were able to keep them without increasing our budget. So the fire engine is through that same type of grant program. It's the federal government's way of pushing money out to the cities.
All right, good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Chief Corey Haynes from the Police Department. I appreciate everybody showing up tonight to learn some information about the millage process and why we're doing this. As the city manager stated, you know, all of us department heads have sat down for many weeks and hours trying to determine what is the best course of action for the city to lead us positively into the future. As it pertains to the police department, I want to go back to the issue of vehicles. As the city manager stated, we've always tried to replace about 5 police vehicles every year, and that includes investigative vehicles, administrative vehicles, the patrol cars that you see out on the road every day. It includes all of the vehicles in our fleet, animal control. But what people don't know, I don't think as much, is how important our reserve officers are to the city and to the police department. Our reserve officers are volunteers. You know, they don't get any pay for what they do, and they go out and patrol all of our city parks. They're at all of our events that we have, like the festival in the park, the fireworks, all the different events we have. And basically, they're operating on our vehicles that we give to them when they're at end of life for us. So what invariably has happened since the recession, instead of being able to replace, 4 to 5 cars a year, we were down to replacing 1 car a year. And those vehicles were not vehicles that we could push onto the reserves, because most of them were at 125 to 140,000 miles, which to an average consumer or average car purchaser, not a ton of mileage. I mean, it's a lot of miles, but you can still get a lot more years out of a car. But your cars aren't driven 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And these cars are driven hard. They go from 0 to 60 in a hurry, if they're going to an emergency run. So it takes a big toll on them, and they also idle a lot when they're at the scene of an accident. So those things really wear these vehicles out. Just this last year, we had to take 2 of the reserve cars out of their fleet and reduce them down to 6 because the suspensions were so severely rusted that they were unsafe. So that's one thing that we really want to keep focus on, is that we want to maintain our reserve program for all the good that they do for the city. We want to be able to have police vehicles that we can turn over to them that are still viable for a couple of years. It's much more expensive to try to buy additional new vehicles. So that's part of it with the vehicles. Again, like last year, we only purchased 1. So we're behind about 10 cars right now. And even with the millage, we're going to start catching up. But it's something to look forward to make sure that we have the fleet that when you do call 911, we're able to get a car there as quickly as possible. As far as adding police officers, what's gone on over the past several years, because we had to reduce the ranks, we still are providing we're providing the best services we can with what we call minimum manpower. We have a shift minimum that we have to have X number of cars on the road for each shift. We have been maintaining that, but unfortunately, because we don't have the amount of people, we're forcing people to work overtime. It's just what happens. We have to have those shifts covered so that our city is safe and protected. And in the policing, we always have to staff for what might happen. We may have a day where we have a couple of cars that are free, but we're going to have the same day where we're going to need 5 more cars. And we rely on bordering cities to help us during those emergencies. But with the overtime, we've been operating for the last few years probably at an average of at least 300 hours of overtime every 2 weeks. It's a lot of overtime that we could cover a lot of. It's not one for one. It's not, if we hire an officer, we're going to cover 100% of that overtime. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately, because we have vacations, we have people that get sick, we have officers that get injured, unfortunately, on the job. So all of those things roll into how many people we have and what we have to do. We had certain times during the past year where we had newer officers that were working 3 double shifts in a row. And then you start to worry about the danger to them. They're getting tired, they're doing too much. So adding 2 additional officers will greatly help that out. You'll get better services because you'll have officers that are fresher and that have good experience in knowing what to do with every situation. And I'd like to jump one down to the next one is dispatch staffing, since I'm here. Dispatching is by far the most difficult job in the police station. I would not want to do it for any amount of money. It's stressful, and you are the lifeline between you, the resident, calling and getting the right services, whether it's police or fire or both. Generally, it's both. If we have a fire scene, we're sending a police car. And it's also difficult to fill those positions. Right now, we have budgeted for 9, but we're running with 7. State regulations say that we're to have 2 dispatchers in dispatch, where we have 1 at all times, so that you have 2, so that you at least have 1 that can go on a break, 1 that can use the bathroom, and you still have dispatch coverage. Unfortunately, with the law change, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, we used to be able to supplement our dispatch with sergeants and or officers. So if an officer could come in off the road, if dispatch needed to have a break or needed to do something else within the station, we're not allowed to do that anymore. With Next Gen 911, which probably everybody read about in the paper when we did the switch to the Next Gen, it's specific training. The dispatchers now have to go through modules of 120 hours of training per year, specific to dispatch. And we can't afford to send command officers and police officers to that training. Number one, it's cost prohibitive, but number 2, and I think more importantly, none of us want our lives to have to call into dispatch and talk to somebody that only answers that phone once in a while. You want the person that's trained to do that job 24/7, and that's what they do. And I think that's really important. So in theory, I'd like to be at 12 dispatchers. Again, what we have is right now we have set up for 3 dispatchers per shift. So we have a total budget of 9. We're at 7 due to dispatchers going to other departments, just increasing their career. And so if we can get to 9, it'll certainly help. That would put 3 dispatchers per shift. But you still have to account for, again, the vacations, the sick time, people have to eat lunch, people have to use the bathroom. So you're always going to be in that situational rotation. So if you have the extra dispatcher per shift, someday if we're able to get to 12, we could eliminate a lot of overtime. Right now, in order to maintain our 2 dispatchers, we're paying a lot of overtime to keep dispatchers there. And you kind of run into the same problem that you do with the police officers as they start to get burned out. You can only work so many hours and still be fresh and alert and, do the best you can at your job. So I think that's all I have at the moment.
If you have budgeted for 9, why is this only at 1 instead of 3 to make the 12 you need?
Based on the amount of funding. We will be able to do much more with 10 than we can with 9 because we'll have that extra position. Again, I'd like to be at 12, but we can at least decrease the amount of overtime and increase the amount of time they have away from that job with the addition of 1.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were, if I'm correct, you were saying this is going into a general fund. How do you separate the fire and the police from the I'm wrong with the other
I should be repeating all the questions, so I'm sorry. So the first question, I'm going to go back and repeat her question. We were just asked why we're not going to 12 dispatchers, why we're not adding 3 dispatch positions instead of 1. And when we went through to try to calculate what we actually needed, we were trying to be very realistic. I met with all the department heads, as did council, and came up with what is the absolute must-have. And the absolute must-have for dispatch is 1. The want or the actual need is 3. But as I said a little bit ago in the presentation, we're not asking residents to take us back to pre-recession. We're asking just to pay for what we need to get by. So the question was, why aren't we at 12? And the police chief answered, which I'm sure everybody at home heard the answer, but not the question. So now the question is about the general fund. So the millage is going to go into a general instead of being a separate public safety levy. We do track that separately through accounting. We have the police and firehouse their own department budget, and we can break down the different millages just like I currently break down the library 1 mil. We will continue to break down that 1 mil, but it can be used for anything. That is true when it's in the general fund. It happens through the budget process. So the whole process goes in about February, actually earlier than February, starting in the fall, November, and we're actually still changing the budget process, so we want to make it a 2-year budget at a time so people will know 2 years out what the budget's going to be, and that's a new thing for the city, as well as I would really like public engagement, but that hasn't happened. But anyway, public can give comment on the budget. But so the police chief comes to me with his budget, we go through that, it's presented to council, and in May, council actually holds a public hearing on what the tax levy is going to be and what it's going to fund. So at that time, everybody will know what the tax, and the public has 2 opportunities to come and talk. Oh, they have more than that because we have budget meetings, but we have typically a budget hearing, that's all we talk about is the budget hearing, and it's kind of like this. I give a presentation, council asks questions about what the tax levy is going to be and what each department is funding and the line items in each department. So council will go through each line item. So you'll know exactly what's being added, how many people are being added, and that kind of discussion. And then about 2 weeks later, we have an actual public hearing at a city council meeting, which is open to the public, of course, to come and talk about. And it's specifically for budget adoption and the tax millage. So that is another opportunity to come and talk about the tax millage. But the 2.25 mills that I talked about earlier was specifically calculated for police and fire. So the way I went about calculating that was I met with both of the chiefs and came up with what is your, you have to have need, not what your want list. I don't care about that. So we came up with the 3 firefighters, the 2 police officers, and the 1 dispatch person. I calculated out what that was going to cost and streamlined that out for 10 years. And then we have a very comprehensive budgeting process. I don't think any of you are budgeting geeks, probably like me. The document's about 300 pages long, so if you're ever bored and want to read it. But in the back of that book, you can find just about anything about the budget in the book, but in the back is a very detailed vehicle and equipment table. And it will tell you the years things are purchased, when we plan on purchasing, those kind of things. And in addition to that, I have a sheet of actual mileage, a rating, what we estimated the cost to be. And so I looked through all that equipment and kind of tried to figure out when we would have to replace that. So I streamlined all of that, the infrastructure, and then tried to figure out, okay, what amount of millage would we have? So in any given year, we may not need 2.25 mills. 1 year we might need 3 mills. 1 year we might need 2 mills. So we will be streamlining it so it doesn't constantly go like this to look out the 2 years of the budget cycle to fund what's coming up. So that money is dedicated to police and fire through that mechanism. I hope that answered your question, maybe. Well, they actually, so there are 2 different numbers, and the fire chief can talk about this better than me, but the 40 calls were times when even people from Royal Oak weren't available. Those were times when nobody from Madison Heights were available, nobody from private EMS were available, nobody from another city was available. 50 times, or about 50 times, we've ran mutual aid, and that's what you're talking about, where they called, nobody from Madison Heights is available, but they send out a warning signal and Royal Oak had somebody. The problem with that is other cities, most other cities, are in the exact same boat as we are. If you go back and look at the chart I was showing about taxable value and tax rates, you see all the cities that are right in the same boat with us. Hazel Park, Ferndale, these are the 2 cities that are closest to us and that we would rely on for mutual aid. They need mutual aid as much or more than we do. So they can't give us somebody all the time because they're struggling just as much as we are. So. Yes, and unfortunately, most people don't know it until they call 911. So, yeah. So that's my next question that I get asked is, am I registered to vote and where do I vote? You can find this on the Secretary of State website. You can also, do you have a question?
Give us an update on the status of the
would be a good word for that. Let me finish up my registered to vote question. So you can go out to the Secretary of State. You can look up if you're registered to vote. You can look up where to vote. And this year, for the first time, you can vote absentee for absolutely no reason. So if you work all the time and you forget that it's election day, all you have to do is email the clerk. She will mail you a ballot. You don't even have to remember that an election's coming. It gets sent to your home and you can vote at home. You don't have to worry about the weather, standing in line. And that's true for all elections. And you don't have to do it for this election, but I would encourage everybody to do it. I'm always upset that voter turnout is so low. So the question again was about the police and fire pension obligation. So we are underfunded. We were about 54% funded on that, but the biggest part of that is we have retirees currently that we don't have money set aside for. So that is part of the tax millage, and that's a pretty big part of the tax millage. It's about 7 mills that is used to fund that. We have drastically changed police and fire pension benefits. We have reduced the multiplier, so the multiplier is part of the calculation to determine how much money you get at the end of the day. And we have also reduced, it's just the money that gets rolled in, so it's just base wages only. We do still have, so the general employees at City Hall do not have traditional pensions anymore. They do not have retiree health care anymore. Those things have been changed even as recently as I think starting in 2009, changes started happening on those fronts because that's unsustainable. But the police and fire pension, that program is still open for pension only, not retiree health care. And that really is because in police and fire pension jobs, you don't want somebody 65 and 70 still trying to do those jobs, first of all. It's a recruiting tool. You have to have it to stay competitive. And most of the employees, when they leave, they are not going to be a firefighter in another place at age 60. But that fund is not funded well. The state has come out with requirements of how funded it should be, and we are in the red on that. We're supposed to be at least 60% funded, and we were 54%. We did write a plan of how we were going to get there, and we are actively moving forward with that. We have made quite a bit of progress over the past 2 years, as well as with our retiree healthcare trust, which I just explained were closed. So the answer to the question is they're underfunded. No. They have health care. Yes. Yeah. No. We made changes to retiree health care. So when someone retires, back in the day, you would get retiree health care forever. So no, the employees have health care. We have made changes to that. We've been making changes to that year after year. Health costs have gone up significantly. Back in the day, health insurance was not even a factor when you offered benefits because it was so cheap, but it's astronomical in these days. So all you have to do is watch the debate to see that's a hot topic all over the country. Are there any other questions?
Like a 10-year mill, is it forever?
It changes the charter millage so it does not expire. And so it will hopefully keep us from going out. Well, I would say it would keep us from going out and next year having the same crying, I need money for the library again. Because that's what's going to happen. The library millage will expire in 2020, as will the millage restoration. And you'll see me right back again begging people to come out and vote yes again. And right after that, 2 years later, the vehicle millage expires, so I'll be back again. So this will roll those in and add some security to the city so we can do some things. Yes? Yes. No. So the question is about absentee voting. As a senior citizen, you always had that option. But me, I didn't. I had to go in on a Saturday before the election because I normally work here from about 6 in the morning till 8, 9 o'clock at night. So it's a chore for me to get to vote. I would have to try to go to lunch or something. So now people that are not senior citizens can, for absolutely any reason, you don't have to have a reason. You used to have to be out of town You had to come up with a justifiable reason as to why you wanted to vote absentee if you were not a senior citizen. That was one of the reasons. Now it doesn't matter what the reason. It could be I'm just too lazy to go vote. All you have to do is contact the city clerk and just say, I want to be added to the absentee list. And you will be on the absentee list. So now I did that, and now they mail me my ballot. I don't have to do anything else. So
that's my question. Do I have to do that, or because I've already
no.
been getting absentee?
If you were already on the absentee list, you're on the absentee list. Yeah, it's like a new benefit for me, but it doesn't do anything to you. Yes.
If I'm meeting on the clerk and want to get on that list, do I have to do that every year or every month?
It's my understanding it's once and done, but I will double check that for you. I thought when I signed up I was done and I'm going to be on the permanent absentee voter list, because what I had been doing is every time there was an election, I had to remember to tell the clerk I want to be on the absentee list, or I had to come in and vote on Saturday, and I don't have to do that anymore, so she said. So I will double check though and let you know. Do what? Oh, there we have, yeah, it's one and done. I was pretty sure it was, but yes. When you update your information, so you have to update your driver's license typically, you would go to the new city where you live and go to the clerk's office, or when you go to the Secretary of State and fill out your driver's license, you no longer can vote in Madison Heights. If you don't do that though, if you're a renter or you owned a home in Madison Heights, or a college kid as a prime example that might have a driver's license and ID and they're registered to vote in Madison Heights, and they now move to Grand Rapids, and now they've moved on to California, and they have never changed anything, they could still vote in Madison Heights because they still...
Some sort of connected digital record.
The Secretary of State ultimately keeps the... Yeah, and the Secretary of State's where you could go to see, are you registered to vote, and where would my precinct be? It's actually the Secretary of State website. So the state controls the election database ultimately, and if the person does not, go to the Secretary of State and update their driver's license, and everybody still thinks they live in Madison Heights, they could still vote in Madison Heights. But they couldn't vote where they were living now. They can't vote to towns. Yeah. The Secretary of State handles all of that. Yes?
We've established that the millage is not going. Is there a cap every year as to how much it can be raised?
Well, it can't be raised higher than, it won't even be the 16 because it's rolled back already. So it can't be higher than the 3.368 or 3.3687 addition to the 8.861. That's kind of crazy. But it can't go up like that. The millage can only go down. So that amount is the maximum that it would be. But as market values continue to go up, so I would anticipate, so that's at the end of December. So just from looking at housing values, I can tell you that I'm going to have a rollback this year because home values have gone up still. So I will have to roll back that millage rate again. So even after you vote for it and it goes out to levy, it will already be less than what was approved because that 8.8 mils of the original 10, and I know it gets kind of confusing, is rolled down. So we only have a mechanism to roll it down. We don't have a mechanism to roll it up without going back out to the voters again, which if you read other cities go out for what they call a Headley override. That's what they're talking about, is to make up the difference of that rolling down. And that's been a conversation at the state, but there's just no movement on it. There's a couple other things. I didn't put it in the presentation because I could talk about finance at the city for 2 days, and I know you guys don't want to be here that long. But state revenue sharing, if you ever have heard of that, the state of Michigan funds their local governments less than any other state in the entire country. So since 2004, the Madison Heights has lost $16 million to the state of Michigan. That's money that the state has withheld from us to fund their programs. So there is a constitutional amount that they pass on to us through the sales tax that the state gets. They take a portion of that based on our residents, and they pay that to us through the state constitution. There was another part of that was called statutory state revenue sharing. That changed, and it changed drastically under Rick Snyder, under Governor Snyder, I should say. So the amount that the city, just Madison Heights, has lost is $16 million. And we have no way to make that up. There's an organization through the state that I'm very active in fighting with the state to get some of that money back. They do give us increases, but they're like 2%. And those are just the increases that the state are seeing anyway. They're not giving us back our money. So you can look at any state. There's a great website called SaveMyCity.org. If you follow me on Facebook, you'll see I post their stuff. But there's no movement at the state to fix that problem. It's something I talk to our legislators about all the time. It's something you can talk to the legislators about all the time. But there just is no momentum to change anything. But on that website, it will show you how every other state in the entire country is funded versus how Michigan funds cities. So they really, I say, starve the cities to feed the state. So that definitely is another part that feeds into this. And when I talked about only 61.5% of our revenues come from taxes, that's about another 20% of our revenues. So as we were going through the recession, we also were dealing with that. And there is no mechanism for that to go up either. We're kind of beholden to the state over that piece. So, are there any other questions? Yes.
What is the best way to get them informed? Because I think we all need to make an informed decision when we get our goal.
Yes.
And so how would you advocate people talking to their neighbors, such things like that?
Well, there's a couple different things. I read my presentation in a video, and that is online. It doesn't have as much information as I gave you tonight. This presentation tonight is being aired on cable, and it's also taped, so it will be posted out on the website. It also is it's being shown live right now if anybody's watching. So that's one way to get information. I'm always here. I talk to anybody who comes in that asks to speak to me as long as I'm not in a meeting, so I'm welcome to meet with anybody. But the best thing that you could do either way, talk to your neighbors. Make sure that they have factual information. I will be sending out a newsletter in a couple more weeks to all the households in the city. But I really just want people to get the facts and make the decision for themselves, not feel like somebody else has an opinion and they have to follow along or think that it's something that it's not. So the best thing you could do is talk to your friends and family and ask them to come out and attend a meeting. We do already have another meeting on September the 19th, but I'm not opposed to having more meetings. I mean, I would have meetings all the time if people would come. I'm thrilled that as many people are here tonight as are, because this is the most public engagement we've ever had at the city. So I would go anywhere to talk to people. You're having a barbecue and want me to come? Hey, I'm all about it. So all my other meetings have had about 6 to 8 people in it. And, you know, it's taken a significant amount of my time to meet with them because I get off at 4:30, the meetings aren't till 7, I work from 4:30 to 7, I go to the meeting and I'm thinking 6 people are there, but I don't care because that's 6 people I get to talk to. Those 6 people know 6 more people, and I just want people to get the information and make the decision that's right for their own finances and their own personal life. So I'll be around for a while after. If you want to come up, assuming my computer works, I can look up your taxable value and tell you exactly what it's going to mean to you. Or if you know how to look up your taxable value, on that website, Madison-Heights/millage, there is a calculator on your tax bill at the top. And that's something else we changed, trying to be more transparent at the city. Everybody this year got a tax bill, even though a lot of people pay it through their mortgage company and didn't even have a clue what they were paying. So everybody got a tax bill this year. At the top of it, it says a bunch of different numbers. It will have the assessed value, state equalization value. I'm not sure all the little numbers, but on there it will say taxable value. That's the number that you need to put into the website. If you don't know how to use the computer, the calculation is really simple. You take the taxable value, divide it by 1,000, and multiply it by the millage rate. So the important part is to divide it by 1,000. But you'll know when you don't divide it by 1,000 and you see this huge number, you'll know that that's wrong. So anyway, thanks for coming out. I have one more question.
I don't have a question, but I just have a quick comment. You know, as a member of the business community, it's important for me to be here.
Thank you very much. And thank you for coming tonight.
I have a comment. I don't know about anybody else, but I have been to an awful lot of these meetings. I've lived in Madison since 1958. This lady right here has done more for this damn city than anybody I know of, and she's worked her butt off. So we gotta help her out and support her.
I don't take well to compliments, but thank you.
Could you just see if this is not a bill next time you send it like that? Some of us were freaking out like, what? Call my mortgage company. Why
Oh,
did you
yeah.
do that? And the lady said very nicely, look at the top. I'm like,
Yeah, it was a shock. Yeah, especially most people pay mortgages. But I think it's important that people know what they pay. And it's important too, I've always, not that you want to hear me keep talking, like I said, I could talk all night long, is you need to know what your mortgage company's paying because they are not without making mistakes. So you need to check them out and you need to know what's being paid through your escrow and you need to pay attention to what your mortgage company is paying to the city as well. So, well, thank you all for coming. Like I said, if you have any questions, I'll be around for a while. And then if you want to look up your taxable value, I can help you do that too.